When was the first time you heard about Xbox, or what was the first Xbox game that you ever played? For some, it was the very first Xbox, as well as Halo, bridging the gap between those of us who cut our teeth on games like Quake on PC at LAN parties to now playing Halo head-to-head in a college dorm through the campus network. For others, it might have been Gears of War on the Xbox 360. I'll never forget filling the screen of my giant projection TV with blood splatters from a roaring chainsaw, or the long hours screaming into a headset playing Call of Duty World at War, doing everything I could to help my team win a game of headquarters. For a lot of us, Xbox is the console that we started with. For me, it was a moment of returning to my console roots. I grew up on Coleco and had every Nintendo system that was ever made, and I drifted from PC gaming because I wanted to get back to something that was more simplistic. And it took a slight push from a friend who said, let's get an Xbox in that new World at War game. And like many, Xbox became a household name. It wasn't as silly or family game or party game oriented as a Nintendo Wii. It felt like a more serious place to game and party up with friends to win some games of Call of Duty or shoot some aliens in Dead Space 3. And like many gamers back then, I had no concept for what a first-party game was or what an exclusive was. All I knew is that games came to my Xbox and I could play a lot of them with my friends. But slowly, through the Xbox One era and then the Xbox Series X and S era, I've seen behind the curtain. And it's never been clearer to me that Microsoft has been slowly killing Xbox the entire time. From terrible contract policies that had half of the 343 staff leaving every 18 months while they tried to cobble together Halo Infinite, to a corporate climate that clearly drives talent away, with a continued stream of directors and creative directors as well as staff leaving the studios. Everwild lost its creative director. Halo Infinite lost 2 directors in 2 years. Forza Horizon 5's creative director and several team members left to start a studio. Perfect Dark lost its game director and roughly half of its staff. And all of this has led to numerous projects being rebooted, experiencing slowness to come to market, or being described as being in a rough state. This is where creativity comes to die, underneath Microsoft ownership. Their corporate policies are designed for utilitarian software like Windows or Microsoft Office, not creative enterprises like video games. Microsoft created a sinking ship, and they intend to save it by turning it into something completely different. Their strategy over the years actually hasn't changed, it's just now in overdrive. They've always preferred buying studios and games instead of investing in their own IPs, and that strategy has hit such a size and scope that Xbox is no more. We are now entering into the era of Microsoft gaming. Now, every weekday here on Reforge Gaming, I tell you what I think about a gaming topic, and then I go to a live stream to hear what you think. So, if you want more like this, be sure to hit subscribe. And in this video, I'm going to start by looking at the ZeniMax Bethesda acquisition because it's a glimpse into what I believe Phil Spencer was pushing for. And then we're going to look at the Activision Blizzard deal and how it clearly changed everything. Then we're going to look at 2024, the year we're in now, as everything has rapidly progressed in the pivot that we've seen with Xbox. Lastly, I will tell you what I think and why I'm saying that Microsoft killed Xbox. The ZeniMax Bethesda acquisition is the first place we get a clear indication that things are changing, and look no further than how Phil Spencer handled the property post-merger. Now, the importance of looking at this is to contrast it against the Activision deal, because it will be clear that the Microsoft strategy is now in the room, and the Xbox strategy of exclusives and Game Pass has been walked to the door. And funny enough, this all started in 2014 with none other than the 2 men who are still at the helm, Phil Spencer and Satya Nadella. From an article by Ars Technica, the headline claims Microsoft almost abandoned Xbox brand after the Xbox One launch. Apparently, the Xbox One launch was so bad that Phil Spencer was the only one left to pitch the idea of keeping the Xbox game division open for business. From the article, by early 2014, a few months after the Xbox One launch, Witten had left for Sonos, and Spencer was the one left to pitch the value of the gaming division to newly named Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. Then the question is, do we go forward with Xbox, Spencer said, because we're getting really outsold by PlayStation in the market at this point. Do we stay invested in it, or do we make a different decision? So this is the beginning. This is the inception point, okay? Satya Nadella is the newly appointed CEO of Microsoft, and Phil is stepping in to take the helm of Xbox. And I believe the ZeniMax Bethesda acquisition, contrasted against the Activision acquisition, gives us a glimpse into what Phil was aiming at and what Satya's been aiming at. Keep in mind, Phil really stressed words like creative in interviews last year. I observed at the time that he seemed annoyed, likely with the anti-creative nature of Microsoft's corporate policies handcuffing the studios under his charge. But ZeniMax Bethesda was a chance to leverage property in a way that Xbox hadn't seen in a while, and Phil apparently shocked the CFO of Xbox with his demeanor after the contract ink was dry. And the timeline here is important. Pulling from an IGN article entitled, Xbox's Phil Spencer seemingly decided to make all ZeniMax games exclusives in 2021 meeting. This is 1 year into the new Series X and S console generation. Phil is likely keenly aware of the lack of their first-party releases, and he saw Bethesda as a way to tip the scales. So much so that the CFO was surprised. When Tim Stewart asked Matt Booty about the meeting, Tim's response was very telling. From the article, all games going forward? Stewart asked. Not just new IP, but all games going forward? Wow. Now, this was after telling regulators that the content would be handled on a case-by-case basis. This is quite clearly and undeniably the opposite of case-by-case. It's sweeping. And it was clear that for Phil, this deal was about exclusivity. GameIndustry.biz reported that, quote, Phil Spencer stresses exclusivity in ZeniMax deal. That was their headline, and their byline pulled out the strongest quote, which claimed that, quote, this is about delivering great exclusive games for you that ship on platforms where Game Pass exists. So, from where I sit, Phil saw this as Xbox's path forward, shore up great exclusives to bolster Game Pass growth. But this was in 2021, before it was clear that Game Pass growth was going to slow and plateau. And it was also before Microsoft wrote a $70 billion check for Activision Blizzard. It was clear when the Activision Blizzard deal was first announced that everything was changing. Never before had a video game acquisition had such a high dollar amount at $70 billion, but the property beneath the company spans entire genres and generations. World of Warcraft released roughly 20 years ago, same for Call of Duty. Diablo 1 goes even further back than that, and now Microsoft was attempting to secure all of it. But this deal spanned more than just traditional console or PC games, it also came with King Mobile. And in 2023, just 2 years after Phil Spencer told Bethesda that all games going forward would be exclusive, Xbox was primed to own some of the biggest names in gaming. And for many Xbox fans, this was finally the win that Xbox needed. With 3 years into the Xbox Series X and S, they had little to show in the way of big first-party releases. And while Xbox chased down Activision Blizzard, they launched games like Hi-Fi Rush and Redfall, leaving many hoping for more consistent pastures. Because Hi-Fi kicked off the year in a strong way, but then Redfall quickly brought everything back down from a morale perspective. And this is when Phil Spencer signaled that the strategy had changed. His famous line, pulling from GameSpot here, he said, Activision Blizzard King is not our strategy, but it is an accelerant for our strategy, Spencer said. This was the famous interview where he admitted that they weren't in the business of out-consoling Sony and Nintendo, and that an 11 out of 10 Starfield wouldn't get people to start selling their PS5s. And this tone shift sort of flew under the radar for the most part, because later in November of 2023, Phil does an interview with Famitsu, and it signals a change has taken place. Game Rant's article is helpful here with the title. Phil Spencer says we need to think of PlayStation and Nintendo users as part of the Xbox community. And from the Famitsu interview, this quote is clearly targeting a different future. Here's what he said. Xbox is a community of players, so it's important to build a community of players across a variety of platforms, which gives the community and the brand even more strength. Just as we think of ROG Ally and Steam Deck as part of the Xbox community, we need to think of the many Nintendo Switch and PlayStation users as part of the Xbox community in the future. Now, this is very juxtaposed against telling Bethesda just 2 years ago that all their titles will be exclusive to Xbox, and saying that the acquisition was about delivering great exclusive games for you that ship on platforms where Game Pass exists. And if the interview wasn't enough to convince you that he had shifted away from an exclusive strategy, the Xbox CFO told a Wells Fargo summit that a change in strategy was taking place. Pulling from GameSpot here, it's a bit of a change of strategy. Not announcing anything broadly here, but our mission is to bring our first-party experiences and our subscription services to every screen that can play games, Stewart said. That means smart TVs, that means mobile devices, that means what we would have thought of as competitors in the past, like PlayStation and Nintendo. So to me, it's clear. Activision Blizzard changed the strategy. PlayStation and Nintendo are now no longer thought of as competitors. And the CFO is making it clear. What happened with ZeniMax Bethesda? Well, that's being reversed. First-party games are going to stop being exclusive. Now this lit up the runway lights for 2024. Xbox's evolution will be looked back on in a variety of ways, but 2024 will likely be the year that we remember as the beginning of the end. The Xbox brand and platform as we know it is vanishing before our eyes and being replaced by something that feels like it'll only be Xbox in name. With Microsoft no longer behind the curtain, they're the ones driving the ship. We went from rumors about first-party games coming to PlayStation and Nintendo to a podcast where Phil Spencer felt the most non-Phil Spencer that I've ever seen him. At the time, I remarked how very little they actually said. It felt very strange. It very much felt like Microsoft marching orders rather than the Xbox that I remember. Now, this year also kicked off with 1,900 layoffs, primarily targeting Activision Blizzard, and now we have studio closures that even die-hard fans can't seem to make sense of. And for some, they feel that it's time for Phil Spencer to step down, which I don't think would actually make much of a difference, as it is clear that Microsoft is calling the shots now. But that doesn't mean Phil is against what is going on or that he wasn't part of the planning. It does seem, however, that he was still pushing for the old playbook in 2021 with Bethesda. But Activision Blizzard is just too large to operate under that plan. It's clear that Microsoft is pushing for more cuts and more profit, likely because the cost of the acquisition, as well as the annual production costs for all these studios, is weighing heavy on the minds of shareholders and executives. It's time to start making the money back, and shoring up exclusives for Game Pass just doesn't achieve that. We just reported yesterday that even Call of Duty is being debated internally about whether or not it should land on Game Pass. It simply generates too much money from its annual sales to do that. And as someone who came back to console gaming through Xbox, and I built most of my console library during the 360 and the Xbox One era, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I said this yesterday, and it landed as a surprising epiphany. Microsoft killed Xbox. They ensured that Xbox would never flourish as a gaming platform by strangling developers and creative work. Their one-size-fits-all corporate policies are acidic to the creative process and everything that goes into a video game. 4 to 5 year projects that require team synergy, accurate vision transfer, and a unified staff simply can't get any traction or momentum under a 18-month contract policy that Microsoft has put into place such a long time ago. Microsoft is to blame for the talent loss as well as the troubled projects, and they will be to blame when more people leave in the future. Some have even observed that the recently closed studios had already experienced leadership and staff exodus, which may have played a role in the studio's closing. And even if it didn't play a role, it's a worrying pattern that hasn't seemed to slow down. Ninja Theory's co-founder left just as the Hellblade 2 previews were taking place. To me, the Xbox platform and brand is evaporating from the heat of the large spending to grab big property. Phil Spencer made it clear when he told Famitsu that Minecraft was the catalyst to seeing things differently. And this was echoed by Matt Booty in a way that Matt Piscatella took notice of during the famous 4 Games Coming to Other Platforms podcast. Piscatella observed Matt Booty's comment of, "Today, big games like Roblox or a Fortnite can actually be bigger than any one platform, and that really has changed the way we think about things," was a key point that's getting glossed over and shouldn't be. So Matt thinks this is being glossed over. Well, look at what Booty is saying. This has changed the way we think about things. Here again is admittance that they have completely changed the way they view the industry and the way that they view games. The strategy has changed. The company has changed. So to me, it's crystal clear. Xbox is no more. Microsoft is in the driver's seat now. But that's just what I think. Now it's time to hear what you think. And you can do that in a comment below, or you can come over to the live stream. There'll be a card right here, a pinned comment below as well. And if you want more content like this, always remember to please like, share, and subscribe.